Let's start with that Baylor Texas Tech game, GP, because listen, great win for Tech. Becomes just the third team. Credit to ESPN Research where I saw this. Just the third team Texas Tech was to come back from 15 down on the road against a number one ranked team that I believe was also undefeated and win the game. They get it done. I had, coincidentally enough, I had talked to a couple coaches earlier this season that had faced Texas Tech and had given Mark Adams his proper due. Again, this is well in advance of Texas Tech's past two wins, which have been fantastic, but basically saying, listen, the style that he has built that Texas Tech program around when he was serving under Chris Beard now as a head coach, it's a style that's not easily one that can be adapted into your own program, but still there are a lot of teams that are playing to that, and there are pros and cons to that overall. But for Tech, big time. I mean, that's Tuesday was an awesome night of college basketball across the sport. Men's college hoops, I thought it was a top 3, top 4 day. Texas Tech winning is the highlight. And I don't know. I couldn't find this. I want to know the last time a team did, and I'm sure it's happened somewhat recently, but Texas Tech has got back-to-back wins here, GP, against top 5. Technically, Kansas has now dropped out of the top 5 in KenPom, but at the time it was Kansas was top 5, Baylor was top 5 in KenPom. So back-to-back wins, top 5 KenPom teams, with at least one of them being on the road. Not an easy feat to do. Red Raiders are now 12-3, and where do you have them in your Wednesday morning top 25-1?
They moved up to 16th in the top 25-1, one spot behind Mike Krzyzewski's Duke Blue Devils. If you hadn't heard and you just starting to listen to the podcast, Coach K is retiring at the end of the season.
That's correct.
We reported that a long time ago.
You're damn right we did.
Just want to make sure everybody knows.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Listen, there are people. The college football season is over.
Yeah,
and although I always laugh at this idea that it's so insulting to the general sports audience that they don't have the attention capacity to possibly follow college basketball when, there's been 3 college football games in the past 8 days. People that want to get into college basketball, they have at least tuned in and checked in. They don't wait until the second the National College Football Championship game ends to suddenly be like, who's the best team? So anyway.
Speak for yourself. That's what I do. I just started paying attention to college basketball yesterday.
And yet you knew this podcast delivered the news. This is Mike Krzyzewski's final season. So
I picked that up. I picked that up along the way, but now I'm laser focused. Now I'm ready to go. Let's get this college basketball season underway.
Let's get going. What are your thoughts on what we saw there with Baylor and Tech? Because one, that's the best win of any team so far this season in terms of value overall. No one can say they have a better win than Tech on the road at Baylor, a team that's going to likely be a number 1 overall seed. So that was my biggest takeaway. What about you?
Well, slow down. We can't go with that. Baylor's likely going to be the number 1 overall seed. Like, we don't know that.
I meant number 1 seed. If I said overall number 1, I'm excited to gab with you here on a Wednesday morning after a great Tuesday night.
They're how about this? They're on pace to be. They're on track to be a number 1 seed and perhaps the number 1 overall seed. By the way, I only dropped Baylor to number 2 in the top 25-1.
I think that's fair.
They've got this, they've still arguably got the best resume in the country, but they've certainly got the second best resume in the country. They're still 15-1 overall, 7-1 in the first 2 quadrants. They've got 4 quadrant 1 wins. Nobody in the country's got more than 4 as of this morning. So if you follow the top 25-1 at all, Auburn is now number 1. Baylor is now number 2. And I was texting with you and Ncaa last night, and I was like, as I've said many times, I don't really root for any particular teams, but I do root for the top 25-1. I want it to be as uncomplicated as possible each and every morning. And so I found myself in a little bit of a tough position because Baylor loses. That's your number 1 team. And then I had Auburn number 2, but Auburn technically an underdog on the road at Alabama. And at number 3, I have UCLA, followed by Gonzaga at number 4. And I was like, okay, Baylor loses. Now, if Auburn loses, do I really have to elevate UCLA to number 1? Because that's not going to go. I've been doing this long enough. I know what goes over well and what doesn't. And UCLA with a blowout loss to Gonzaga being number 1 and have, they barely play. They were off nearly a month. It's going to light my mentions up. And I had reached the point, and this is not something AP voters would do, I believe it is something I've done before, but I had reached the point where Baylor loses, Auburn loses.
Mm-hmm.
I just keep Baylor number 1. And I make the argument they've still got the best resume in the country, even after a 3-point loss to Texas Tech.
So credit Texas Tech, second win over a number one team in program history. And it's the third time the Red Raiders in their school history have won back-to-back games against top 10 opponents. So big time stuff there. We're talking seed bump city for the Red Raiders here. And you know it. Seed bump city. This is going to wind up being a couple of wins that pay off just beautifully down the road, and for Texas Tech to kind of just really shut down Baylor. Baylor went cold down the stretch. I in real time, I was waiting for Baylor to make a couple of plays that just never materialized. It was a bit odd to see that overall, but yeah, 21-game win streak is snapped for the Bears. It was the third longest in Big 12 history. Baylor had actually also won 22 straight home games. That streak is over as well. But yeah, Baylor actually, even though it only lasted for a couple of hours, Baylor was the 4th team in the past 50 years to be the reigning national champions and make it the ensuing season to be the final undefeated team. This happened with Duke in 2001, 2002. UNLV, and and Duke in 91-92 also did it. So it's not common that you have the reigning champs also wind up going the deepest into the next season before taking the final loss. But Baylor, even though it was only by a margin of 3 hours, they qualify with that as well, and they take their first loss. A school record 6 consecutive wins against ranked opponents was also snapped, but Baylor's 19-4 in its last 23 games against ranked teams.